Or UN Rights Office said on Tuesday that it is in discussions with Uganda over how to continue its work in the country after the government said it had to leave. A move activists say highlights the country's deteriorating record on civil liberties. The office was set up in 2006 and has brought to light widespread rights violations by security personnel, including torture, illegal detentions, and failure by the state to prosecute offenders.
Uganda told the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, last week that it would not renew the mandate for its office, effectively expelling the rights monitors. Joining us this morning is Agather Atuhaire, who is a journalist and a lawyer. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. Agatha,
good morning.
Okay, great. I mean, hearing the conversation this morning and seeing the possibility of the UN being expelled, what, as a journalist and as a lawyer, what does this mean for the citizens of Uganda and democracy as it should be in Uganda?
Well, I think it's worrying. We have been seeing a trend of torture of opponents in government, journalists actually as well, and civil society activists. So when the government gets up and kicks out one of the observers of human rights, it becomes more worrying than we have already been seeing. And while it gives reasons like it has enough institutions and civil society presence to monitor human rights, we have seen that that's not the case. Because the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which is mandated by the Constitution to observe and protect people's rights, has not been doing its work for lack of independence, for lack of teeth really to bite and bring to book people that are violating these rights. So this actually, we have been worried about it and hope that the talks that they continue to have yield something so that monitors that we think can really have something on government and its leaders can stay and ensure that the rights situation in this country does not get worse than it is already.
Well, I want to, also ask about allegations, because I've also seen reactions to this story, and a lot of people say that, Museveni might be doing this because, there are slight or small accusations that the UN office and a couple of other non-governmental or international NGOs that exist in Uganda are trying to, bring in the LGBTQ conversations into the country. And of course, Museveni is not really excited about that. So is there any truth, to any of all the, these stories or these rumors?
No, I actually do not think there's any truth to that. I think the biggest issue we are dealing with is politics here. That because when you look at the trend, the UN Human Rights Office was invaded by military personnel and police in 2021 when the then presidential candidate Bobi Wine, also known as Chagulanyi, had gone there to submit a report about human rights violations. That the police beat up journalists that had accompanied him to cover that event. Then last year also we saw the government of Uganda being put on the spot by the UN Committee on Torture over torture allegations in this country. So I think it actually stems from that they do not want to be held accountable by the international community, and they can deal with the Ugandan activists, the civil society people, because those they can just crush them and ensure the frustrations that have been ongoing can get worse, but they cannot do anything about the UN, for example. And I think that's where it is coming from. The LGBT issue, it's one of the rights that should be observed really, but it comes in as an excuse. But the actual reason is that there's been growing intolerance on dissenting views in this country, and there's been every effort to try and stifle it and silence those who might question those in power.
Agatha, welcome back. Thanks for joining us once again.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we
we can
can.
hear you.
Yes, we can. So I want you to, continue your thoughts concerning, the questions that I asked earlier. And I will share this. It says here, on August 20th in 2021, the authorities announced without prior notification that they had halted activities of 54 rights groups in Uganda. A year after, on the 5th of August in 2022, once again, Uganda banned from operation Sexual Minorities Uganda, which is a prominent LGBTQ rights organization. So I want to ask if these are, if these are closely related with what's going on with the UN rights group here.
I think they are, but in a way that that the sexual or the homosexuality talk has been a perfect excuse for the government to clamp down further on civil society or NGO operations. Because when you look at what has been happening, many other NGOs have been closed before their accounts frozen when they had nothing to do with the sexual minorities issue. But that issue is also an issue that is sticking in this country, because as you remember, there was even a law that was passed to the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was later nullified by court. So it's an issue that, yes, many Ugandan government officials and many Ugandans, as you know, many Africans have not opened up to that. But I think in our case as Uganda, they use it mainly as an excuse to clamp down, like I said, on dissent against, in political terms, really.
All right.
Because we've seen many other maneuvers to stop NGOs from operating, and it has had very little to do with sexual minorities per se, but mainly because they want to control the awareness and sensitization of citizens against the many ills that the government officials have been engaged in.
Very quickly, Agatha, what's the way forward? Should this eviction finally take place? We're seeing that the United Nations is trying to, or the UN Rights Office is trying to extend its stay. And should the Uganda government still hold its ground and this is eventually finalized, what next?
The way forward is the ball is in the court of Ugandans, really, because even with the UN Human Rights Office around, as I've told you, it hasn't been any better. We haven't had a day that goes by without seeing people with torture marks and wounds and incarcerations. There are 2 MPs, for example, that have been in incarceration for the last 17 months. And there was no trial for them. The other day we had that there was a government deal where they were allowed to be given bail. So even with the UN Human Rights Office around, we have been having very, very many human rights violations, and they have been rampant. So the way forward is for Ugandans to say enough is enough and push against these violations. I don't know how, but something has to be done, and really by Ugandans. I do not think other people can really. They can only help and supplement their efforts, but they can't take the center stage in this fight.
Well, there is also something called the Ugandan Non-Governmental Organizations Act of 2016 that gives the government powers to ban and suspend and freeze accounts of non-governmental organizations in the country that they probably do not find favor in. Now let's also talk about other rights groups that exist in the country that aren't international. How are they faring, and also what is the status of human rights, the respect for human rights in Uganda? How bad is it?
The civic space has been shrinking for the last couple of years. Like I told you, we have seen closures of other human rights organizations, Action Aid, for example, the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, Chapter 4 and its executive director, Nicholas Opio, who was also arrested on trumped up charges in 2020. So it has been a trend that gets worse each day, and that law and the NGO Bureau's powers to just get up and close non-government organizations you have been seeing a clear case of trying to stop voices that are holding them accountable and saying respect human rights. We have laws that provide for human rights, the Constitution, an entire chapter dedicated to human rights protection, but that is not done. And you're asking how bad the situation is. I could point you to social media